everybody, welcome to yet another video. So today we're having a little look at something that I do a reasonable bit of these days, and that's doing motorcycle decals, but doing them with an airbrush. I don't do much on airbrushes because I'm not an artist, so I feel it sort of like excludes me from doing too much on them. But I know quite a few people have said to me they'd like to see me doing more on airbrushes, and I have quite a collection of airbrushes. I've got about 20 airbrushes now, all of them right up to I want a custom micron, which is mostly regarded as sort of like the creme de la creme of airbrushes. But what we're going to use today, and I'll run through the process of what I'm doing as well, so there'll be a little bit about the airbrush I'm using, which happens to be a Richpen, a Gubpiece, what they call a Gubpiece or a GP edition, but we'll run into that a little bit more. But while we're at the start of the video, I just wanted to run through the process I'm doing. So what I always do with these, I actually cut my own decals now, and as obviously as you've gathered, because I'm using an airbrush, they're spray on, so they're not like a normal vinyl decal. Now, the advantages of doing spray-on decals is that you can, get the exact colour that you want. I know you can obviously have different colours of vinyls, but you can get a proper metallic finish, but you also get a really thin finish as well. So when you actually do the clear coat across the top, you can put your hands across it and you don't feel any raised surface. Whereas if you're using normal vinyl decals, and a lot of manufacturers use my vinyl decals, when you look at some fairings and there might be, a red, then a blue, then a white. Normally the base colour of the fairing will be white, and the red and the blue will often be decals. It will just be a long stretch of red vinyl, and then they'll put the blue vinyl over the top of that, and they will lacquer over the whole thing. So you can normally feel that when you run your hand along the fairing or the tank or whatever you're doing, you can normally feel that. So by doing a very thin film of paint effectively, and then lacquering over that or clear coating over that, you completely remove that. It is more expensive to do because obviously it's much more time consuming, but people seem to like it and want it because it is just, because it's all paint, it tends to mean a bit more to people. So yeah, there's more of a call for it. So what I always do, as I said, I think I said at the start, I cut my own decals now because I've got and I'll try and remember to put a link in the description, but I've got a Cameo 4. I know they've got a Cameo 5 out now, but I've got a Cameo 4, which is effectively a vinyl cutter. But you can get stencil material for it, which is what we have here. So with the stencil material, it's exactly the same as cutting vinyl, except you obviously remove the part that you would normally keep. So you end up with the stencil for doing the airbrush work. So I always, as you saw me at the start, I'll always go over it with a degreaser, and that helps the actual sticky with the stuff I use that is purposely made. Because you can actually use vinyl as a stencil. If you haven't got any proper stencil material, it's the stencil material is more malleable, so it's much easier to go around curves, and most bike stuff, it isn't normally flat, so it's easier to go around curves. It's also it has much less tack to it, sticky, so it's not as sticky, so it makes removing it afterwards much easier. So what I normally do is I normally go over with first of all, alcohol and a little bit of water, let the tank dry, and then I'll go over it with some panel wipe. Now, if you're putting it on base coat, so direct on base coat, which you can do, and I do sometimes, avoid the alcohol and water stage, because if you've got just base coat on the on the tank, and you're going to spray your decal directly onto it, make sure that you don't use alcohol, because it will actually remove the base coat. A panel wipe won't, and that applies to all decals or all paintwork you're doing. Really, you'll find that an alcohol solution with a little bit of water in it will actually start to remove the base coat, which you obviously don't want. Whereas a proper panel wipe, you'll be able to spray that, and as soon as it's touch dry, you know, it depends on the temperature, but 5-10 minutes, you'll be able to put your cloth over with your panel wipe, and you won't take any of the base coat off. So that's where alcohol is quite different to panel wipe. So in this, I used alcohol and I used panel wipe, and the reason that is because I actually I'm going to do this as a flow coat, because you actually get a better finish for the overall job. So by that, for those people that don't know, I've obviously painted this silver. It actually was silver, but I just put a couple of coats of silver on it, which I have got in another video somewhere, but I put a couple of coats of silver on it. And then I put a couple of coats of clear coat on it, just a U-Pole clear coat, a cheap clear coat. And then I sanded it down to get to the stage where we are now. I'll try and remember to put a link in a video that went into a little bit more detail on doing decals and that, because different way you do them requires different techniques. But particularly with this, where you've sanded down clear coat, make sure that you don't go too fine a grade. I find that the best you'll get away with is 400 grit on a DA sander, and once you've done it at 400 grit, you get enough grip on the paint you're putting on, because obviously, because you're spraying on the paint through a decal, when you remove the decal is going to be the most vulnerable time. And another reason for doing a flow coat is if you happen to get a little bit of bleed, you stand a chance, well, you've got two chances. One, you stand a chance of getting rid of where it bled, so that you keep the work you've done and it all looks fine. Or if it's really horrendous and something's gone wrong, you can literally put some thinners onto a cloth, and you can literally just clean the base coat off, which is what the decal is. So you can literally just wipe that off and start again. Put your panel wipe down, put your stencil on, and start again. So it gives you like a get out of jail card, although it is more involved. And if you are putting it directly onto paintwork, make sure that all your masking is spot on, because as I say, any bleeding will ruin your work, really. So make sure everything is spot on, and make sure that when you put the decal down, what I do is I use a hot air gun, and that's because all this stuff is a form of vinyl, and when you get the vinyl warm, it does a couple of things. It becomes even more malleable, and it also becomes a bit more sticky. And as soon as that heat goes from the vinyl, so when it's time to take it off, it becomes less sticky, so it makes it easier to get off. So I always apply a little bit of heat just to make sure everything is seated down, and that gives you really nice crisp lines when you're removing the vinyl decal, or should I say the vinyl stencil for the decal. Another thing people sometimes ask when you're doing decals, how do you actually know that you're getting them in the right place? Well, it depends what you're doing. If they blend into things like side panels and that, then you need to effectively either put them on the bike and mark them out, not exactly, but just roughly where they should go, so that you get an idea of the flowing lines. Most of the time when I do decals on a tank, I'll just look at a photo to see where they should be originally, because most of the stuff I do is you're just trying to recreate what was done at the factory effectively, maybe with a little twist, something might be a bit different, the color might be slightly different, but basically you're trying to keep things reasonably standard, just a bit better than the factory would do, if that makes sense. So as long as you've got a photo of roughly where the decal will be, I mean, nobody's going to notice 2 or 3 mil out. And the other thing is, when you're trying to see where the decal is on the tank in relation to each other, bear in mind one side is going to be normally the opposite way to the other. In that, you normally read from left to right. So when you put the decal on the other side, then it's obviously left to right, but it's completely the other way around. So I normally do it by eye, and that's where having a revolving table that I have here is really, really good, because it allows you to quickly look from left to right, and look from the top as well, because that's going to be the rider's eye view. So if anything is out, the guy or girl, I suppose, riding the thing is gonna notice it. So yeah, I normally go by eye. I do a little bit of measuring. In this, I actually do a little bit of measuring with the tape just to confirm the eye. But basically, most of it is going to be by eye, because at the end of the day, that's the tool people will use to look at what you've done. So you'll see I'm leaving most of what I do in, because a lot of people, I try to make the video shorter. If you look at my earlier videos, they're all quite short. And a lot of people have asked me to leave much more in that I do. Now, I realise a lot of people are not going to want to watch all this, but there'll be some people that do. So it just gives you an idea of what to do. So if you're finding all this boring, and I can't blame you if you do, then just hurry along, and we'll soon talk about the airbrush. But it's worth showing people what you actually do. And if you're doing stuff like this, make sure things like your razor blades and things like that are sharp, because otherwise it starts tearing the paper, and it just makes what is a reasonably time-consuming job more time-consuming. It is, as I said at the start of the video, it's far easier to print vinyl decals and just stick them on, but some people actually, well, I'm only going over what I said before. Some people will want this done, even though it actually costs more money. Anyway, hopefully you've seen most of that. Now, going on to the airbrush I'm using. The airbrush I'm using is a Richpen, often known as Rich. Now, these are a Japanese airbrush made in Japan by a company. Now, I'm going to try it. It's Fuso, Fuso Seiki Co, as in company. So it's Fuso Seiki Company Limited. Now, they used to make a really high-end airbrush, which they don't make anymore. So when I say that, I mean it was really expensive. But they make a reasonable range of airbrushes still. So this is what they call the GP range, which we'll run into a little bit in a second. But they also make the Apollo range. Now the Apollo, you have a 112A, a 112B and a 113C. I've actually got those. As I said to you at the start of the video, I am building up my airbrush collection, so I will do a video about those at another time. I also do a Spectra, which I haven't got, which is a suction feed airbrush. All my airbrushes I tend to use tend to be gravity feed, so they're obviously fed from the top, like a lot of the spray guns I use. And they also do a Rich 8 series, which I've got the RS508N, and I will do a video on that. And that has a normal like fan end. You know, some of the airbrushes you can get. A couple of the Iwaters I've got them in. So it's like a small air cap, like a small traditional air cap that you would get in a spray gun. So I got the 508N, so we can do a bit on that. But this is a GP series. Now they make a GP1, they make a GP2, a GPS1, and this one, the one I'm using, which is an ES-6. Now the ES-6 is it's physically more or less the same size as the others, but it has a bigger tip. This has a 0.6 tip, whereas the other ones, the GP1 has a 0.35 tip, The GP2 has a 0.4 tip, and they also do a GPS1, which I have got. I've got all four of these, this one being the fourth. The GPS1 is a real fine, it's a 0.2 tip, so it's a real fine tip. And most people who do airbrushes will know that you have to be careful, particularly if you're putting metallic paint through, that when you get to the really finer tip, some of the metallic can be actually too big, and it can start to clog the brush up. So you have to be careful what you're using and what you're spraying it for. Also, obviously with an airbrush with a smaller tip, you'll normally get a finer line. As I said before, I'm not an artist, but sometimes I do need to use fine lines. So I do have quite a big selection of airbrushes for, you know, different things. But this ES-6 is a 0.6 tip, so it's actually good for material that is by airbrush standards, relatively thick, and it's good for some metallic paints. It actually sprays really well, really well. Some of the cheaper airbrushes you get, they will often spit a bit, and they just do not act particularly well. And you do notice with airbrushes, the more money you spend, the finer the control you get with the airbrushes. Some of the Iwata airbrushes with the, I think it's called a Mac valve at the bottom, where you get the small valve just to control the air pressure. When you get those, you can really notice some really fine detail you can do with these airbrushes. Now this one isn't obviously in that category, but it is a good airbrush for people that are mainly used, like me, mainly used to using spray guns, because all the GP or Gubpiece guns, as you can see, have a conventional handle with a trigger. So it lends itself nicely to people that are used to using spray guns and not used to the top lever control on many airbrushes. Another thing you notice, well, it goes back to control again. Another thing you notice on better quality airbrushes is how nice and smooth and fine the graduation you can get on the delivery of the material. And on the cheaper brushes, it just tends to be a little bit more snatchy. They also tend to be a little bit too, you need just a little bit too much force to actually move the lever. But as I said, I will get into doing more airbrushes because I'm getting more and more used to airbrushes. I feel like I need to build up quite a collection of airbrushes before I can talk to you about how good an airbrush is, if that makes sense, because I need to know all the different airbrushes, like I do with my spray guns. Really, I can only say to you something is better than something else if I've actually tried both of them, and that's the idea. They are obviously quite expensive, the better ones, but I am building up my collection. So this ES-6, which is a Gubpiece, although it's not called a GP, but the ES-6 is effectively the thick material Gubpiece. What it has quite big cups, which lends itself nicely to the fact that because it's got a bigger tip, having a bigger cup, or the ability to have a bigger cup, actually allows you to have a lot more material on board. And because you're delivering more material for the bigger tip, it means that you haven't got to keep stopping. So what they do for this one, they actually do a few cups for it, but they're basically they're in Imperial, but it's an SC50, which is 1 3/4 ounces, which is going to be 50 milliliters, hence the SC50. They do an EC50, which is 5 fluid ounces or 150 milliliters. They also do a 250 milliliter cup, an EC250, which is 9 fluid ounces. And it goes on in a conventional style. It's a side cap, obviously, but it goes on the way that like the LPH 50 and some of the Iwatas do, the Kiwami ones and things like that. When you get it, you actually get a a PC8, which is a quarter of an ounce, so it's 8 millilitres, and you also get a PC15, which is 15 millilitres or half a fluid ounce. So the other cups are optional extras, and for what I use, I wouldn't need to get the bigger cups really. I just use an NSY Water LPH 50 or something, which, you know, well, in theory you could go up to 600 millimetre cups. But another thing you'll find on this, the ES-6, is the fact that you can use the cup on the left or the right. So if you're left-handed or right-handed, you should be able to find a position that actually suits you quite well to, you know, stick the cup either side. That's not the same of the GPS 1 and the GP2 and the GP1. You can only use those on the right hand side, and I don't think you can get left-handed versions of them, but it's certainly, you know, with the ES-6, it's certainly a good value gun. I can't remember how much I paid for these. I got them from Painting Tools Japan. Those that watch the channel will know that I use them quite a lot for things, and they're really handy for just stuff that you can't normally get. Stuff that's only normally available in Japan or parts of Asia. In fact, they can only get stuff that is available in Japan because they're a Japanese dealer. If someone like Meiji or anybody, any Japanese company make a product that's not sold in Japan, they can't get it because they can only get whatever's for the Japanese market. So I'll put a link in the description anyway, and you can, you know, go over there if you want to. Another thing that all these Gubpiece guns have got is they've got, which again lends itself nicely to the person that's used to spray guns rather than airbrushes, is the ability to control the fluid. So, and I say that, I know a fair few airbrushes have also got that, but at the back of the gun, you've got a limiter. So it's a limiter for the amount that the needle will pull back, just like you have in a conventional spray gun. And that really lends itself nicely to people that are just not used to using airbrushes, where literally on the better quality airbrushes, it's just the finger that controls the amount, like it does on a conventional spray gun, but you've got no stop there, so it relies on you being very used to the tool and used to using it, whereas something like this is much more forgiving because you can just adjust it. So now we're removing the stencil vinyl, and the time between actually laying the base coat on and removing this is literally about 5 minutes. The temperature on the day we were doing this was, have a quick look at my notes, 12 degrees Celsius. So it wasn't particularly cold, but it wasn't particularly warm either. So I always put a little bit of heat on there just to set the base coat off. Bear in mind you're putting very thin amounts of base coat. If you put too much base coat on, you'll end up getting a ridge that you can feel. So you just need enough literally to colour it, which is why I normally use an airbrush, because you've got a much finer control of how much is going on there. So I always put a little bit of heat on there. Again, just give it a bit of heat, leave it for a couple of minutes, and then start taking the vinyl off. So the time between actually finishing your last coat of base coat and pulling the vinyl off at the sort of temperature I was talking about is, well, 12 degrees Celsius, is about 5 minutes. And the idea of that is it allows the paint still has a bit of suppleness to it. So it breaks off quite easy, or breaks away quite easy from the stencil material. And giving it the 400 grit as the base, it allows the paint that is on there to grip enough. And that's how you get your nice clean lines. Because believe me, if you do this with like 800 grit or 1000 grit, not every time, but quite often, you will take the stencil or your vinyl away, and as you take it away, you'll actually take some of the lettering. It will just like have a little tear, and it's just because it hasn't keyed enough to the, in this case, the clear coat that you've sanded down underneath. And that's the way you can get really good tight lines. And again, as I said at the start of the video, if you do muck it up and you've done it the way I'm doing it here, and there's two reasons for doing it doing it over clear coat. One, it gives you that insurance, but B, it also allows you to get a better final finish. So most of the time that's the way I do it, not necessarily for the insurance, but because it allows you to get a better finish, because a flow coat is normally a better finish than clear over base, and it allows you to get a really nice finish all in one go. It's just the process of the clear coat after you've done the silver. That obviously takes extra time. But if you're doing this, or you manage to have a go at this, do be careful when you're pulling this stuff off. Now I have a couple of really fine, sharp tweezers, and I use those. And when you get things like letters, like in the center of the A, you can see here, there's obviously a small part of stencil material left behind. And this is the part you see me doing now. You need to remove that, but you need to be really careful. You need to just get the tweezer underneath the material to pull it off, but not into the tank, because otherwise you'll leave a little, you might not see it, but you will leave a little indent in the middle of the A. And if people are really fussy, which a lot of people are, they will notice it. So you just have to do it all methodically and do it really carefully. But I think you'll agree, it comes out really, really nice. Nice and crisp, nice and clean. It allows you to do metallics. This is just the standard black, but it allows you to do metallics as well. Now you'll see me straight away, bear in mind this base coat's probably been on 30 minutes, maybe 25 minutes. Bear in mind we've taken the stencil off both sides. You'll see me now putting some panel wipe on, and that panel wipe will just take high spots at the edges. Now hopefully you can see, I'm not sure whether you can or not, to be fair, but you'll see little bits that look like hairlines just in the panel wipe. And all that is the little high edges where the actual stencil material meets the paint. You get a little high edge. So you need to get that off, because if you leave that on, so in other words, you don't clean it afterwards, you will get the little high edges. And when you clear coat over it, you will feel them. You'll feel them underneath the clear coat, which is the whole idea of doing this process, is so that you don't feel it under the clear coat. So make sure you clean it afterwards, like this. And again, that's what I was saying about, don't use alcohol, just use a proper solvent panel wipe, and that will allow you to leave your letters there without taking anything off. If you used alcohol on this, your letters will start smudging, etc. So here's the final work. This is ready. This will be ready for clear coat now. Just some wax and grease remover over the whole thing, and then we just spray it to finish it off. And here's the gun. You can see the control at the back to limit the fluid, or limit the travel of the needle, is nice and big and chunky, and the whole thing is very good. It's a good airbrush for somebody who's coming from spray guns, basically, because it just allows you to makes the transition much easier. You also get a little adapter, I don't know if you can see it at the bottom, you could do earlier, which allows it to take a conventional coupling from that you would normally use with a spray gun, one of the normal, in my case, the Euro adapters. Anyway guys, here's the final result. You can see it's nice and crisp, nice and sharp. Just waiting for clear coat, and job will be done. Anyway guys, if you are enjoying the videos, maybe think about giving us a thumbs up, and why not push out that boat and give us a subscription or something. And thanks for watching the videos as always, and you keep watching them and I'll keep them coming. And we will do some more on some airbrushes. Once I get more of the range, I can do a few more videos. Cheers guys.